Okay, so let's get started and present the presenter for today, Adam Lewenberg. He is the president of Postal Advocate Inc., the only mail audit and recovery firm in the US and Canada. We manage a portfolio of over 103,000 pieces of mailing equipment for the largest US companies. He speaks and teaches nationally on mail savings and industry trends. He is the former industry co-chair for the Boston Postal Customer Council, and he is also a member of the Mail Systems Management Association with certifications in CM, DSS, and MDC. He's a featured writer for Mailing Systems Technology magazine, and he also worked for over 17 years for one of the largest mailing vendors as the Director of National Sales for Presort, tabletop inserters, addressing, hardware, software, and green offerings. He was one of the top 5 account managers nationally, working with some of the nation's top accounts. Postal Advocate is not affiliated with any mailing vendor, so we offer unbiased advice. Over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Doris. So today we get to talk about lost postage. It's one of those topics that basically before we started thinking about it and writing about it and talking about it, we just didn't hear much in the industry. So today what we're going to go over is what is lost postage. Also, we're going to refer to it as dormant postage. Why do these funds get lost? Where do we get our information and what sources do we have? Where does the money go? How much money is out there? Obviously, we don't know the exact amount, but we've come up with some estimates. How do you search for your money? And we're going to give you step-by-step to be able to do this on your own. What can be done to avoid this in the future? There are certain key ways to make sure this money doesn't get lost as you're mailing in the future. And if you need help, how can we help you with this? If you need help from the experts. And what are some other areas you may want to think about the postage and equipment savings that are available? So let's start. What is dormant postage? We call dormant postage postage that has not been used in at least a year and is most likely forgotten. So we find this money typically in postage meter funding accounts, on the postage meter itself, in unused USPS permits, or at the state's unclaimed funds offices. So that's the majority of where this money will be sitting. Why do funds get lost? So there are more reasons than we're going to list today, but these are some of the main reasons. So the first and the biggest is office closures, mergers, acquisitions, or return meters. So with large organizations especially, there's just so much activity that goes on. Whether people are closing a division, closing a group, turning in a meter because usage isn't there, whether they're merging with other companies, whether they're acquiring, and when they acquire, they have to turn in the meters from the previous company, or they're just returning the meters. Does anyone think about how much money is sitting in that meter itself when it gets returned, or how much money is sitting in the postage account that funds that meter? If a meter vendor changes, so let's say you're using Pitney Bowes and you switch to Neopost, or you switch you switch to FP or back to Pitney Bowes, or it could be any of those situations. Does anybody go back and get the money and validate that the money was returned from that previous vendor before they deposit money into the new vendor? One of the big reasons is when someone funds a postage meter, let's say someone sends in a check for $10,000 to fund a postage meter. Most businesses on their accounting statements are going to expense the funds at that point. So they send a $10,000 check in to a postage account, and then on the income statement of that year, they mark the $10,000 as postage expense. It's actually not an expense at that point. It's deposited into another account number for you. It's actually an asset for the organization. So because most companies think of it as an expense, they're not tracking the balances in that account. And when they're not tracking the balances, it's easy for money to get lost. Another reason is there's 2 different ways to fund postage. There's advance accounts where the vendor loans you the money, and then there's prepaid accounts where you pre-deposit funds to be able to use for the future. So what happens in many cases is people switch between these 2 accounts on a regular basis. If they didn't have money in their meter in their account at one point, they borrow funds from the vendor, and then in the meantime, they send money into their prepaid account, and then they keep using the borrowing account. So money is sitting on both accounts, and they lose track. We work with a lot of organizations that have lots of locations, and many of them have no centralized visibility to where those funds are. Every site is managing it themselves, so there's no central control, and that's the easiest way for money to get lost. A lot of times the people either at the locations or at the headquarters who are managing this just don't have any expertise in the mailing category. It's just something that was thrown on them to manage, and they don't know what to look for. As far as permits, USPS permits. And USPS permits, for anyone not familiar, are like pre-deposited funds you have at the post office, not going through a meter. If you think about, a business reply mail, postage due accounts, maybe some sort of bulk mail services that you're doing, maybe through a mail house or even on site, those are post office permits. The issue is that this process is very fragmented in most locations, most accounts. So think about the accounts receivable department might have a business reply account. The marketing might have standard mail permits they use, but those have to be taken out where the mailing is being deposited. So they may use a mail house in Des Moines, Iowa, but they're based in New York. And because of that, they have to set up a new permit in Des Moines. Is anyone tracking the balances in that permit? And then if you have field offices, each may have their own business reply account or postage due account. Very few companies in the United States that we found have very good controls over all their permits. And this is the reason this money gets lost. So we've done extensive research, probably more research than anybody else in the country on this process. So I'm going to give you a little history about our research. So we try to figure out what happens to these lost funds. Like, where does this money go? And is there any way to check to see if this is actually happening, that this money is getting lost? We started buying the databases from the state's unclaimed funds offices, and we found 30,000 transactions so far turned in 15 states that allowed us to buy the database from Pitney Bowes, where Pitney Bowes had turned over those funds to the states as unclaimed property for the client to be able to retrieve on their own. We didn't find a single unclaimed property transaction for anything from the Postal Service or any of the other mailing vendors. So then we did multiple Freedom of Information Act requests with the post office to see what additional information we could get. We had multiple meetings with USPS account managers to figure out what's their process for helping clients. We didn't get any good answers on how they help their clients in this process. I wrote the January 14th cover article for Mailing Systems Technology exposing this issue. And the article was titled, "Has the Postal Service Been Holding Millions of Mailers' Dollars?" Then this article prompted the Inspector General of the United States Postal Service to do a search on this and to do an actual report that you can see a copy of if you're interested, or we can send you a link to, that documented that there is unclaimed funds out there, that the post office doesn't have a great process for it, and we'll explain what they do, and with recommendations to the Postal Service about how they could change it that the Postal Service turned down. We then wrote the January 15th cover article for Mailing Systems Technology to report these findings, and we've had subsequent meetings with the Inspector General's office where they're researching specific accounts to validate the issues. So it's a real thing. This is out there. Any company that is, had decent populations of meters and permits most likely has some lost postage out there for the reasons that we just specified. So where does the money go? So Neopost, Hassler, Franca-Type Postalia, and the USPS, the money stays at those places. Basically, Pitney Bowes, the money gets turned over to the states as unclaimed property after it's held for 2 to 5 years, based on each state has their own requirement of how long the funds can be held by the vendor. So the difference is that Pitney Bowes has their own bank, and because they have their own bank, they're regulated by banking requirements that say any unclaimed funds have to be turned over to the states. The other vendors, Neopost, Hassler, and FP, use the USPS's bank, where that is not a requirement. And so that's the reason why funds aren't turned over from the other vendors. Some older funds from Pitney Bowes may still reside at the vendor based on how they're originally deposited. So most customers who pre-deposit funds with Pitney Bowes are going to send it to the reserve account, or they may send funds into purchase power. There could have been some older funds that were deposited directly to the United States Postal Service that could still be sitting at Pitney Bowes. USPS permanent accounts. So this is an interesting one. So the funds always stay at the USPS. And so think about this. So pretend you're a large organization and you've got lots of sites, or you have different groups that had permits. After 2 years of inactivity, so you don't use that business reply permit for 2 years, the post office will send you a note that says, they'll send you a letter, and they'll say, you have 60 days to retrieve your funds, or else we're going to make your account inactive. You have 60 days to retrieve it. If that letter goes to someone who's no longer working there, if that office or branch is closed, that money is just going to sit there. No one's going to get the letter. And even in most large organizations, they're not going to react to that in 60 days anyway. So If you don't retrieve your funds in 60 days, it gets deposited into a different general ledger account of the Postal Service, and the Postal Service considers it income for that year. No future notifications are going to be sent to you on that permanent account ever again. The money can be redeemed at any point in time. You can go to your local post office, and if you have proof that you had that permanent account at one point, you can get the money redeemed, but the post office isn't going to notify you ever again of these funds. So if you think about this for a sec, and if you think about this, with the Neopost, Hassler, FP, and the United States Postal Service, they'll do initial notifications. Occasionally, you're going to have an overzealous postmaster who's going to do the right thing and try harder to reach somebody to return the funds, but it is not a requirement. So after they've done initial notifications, it's sort of up to you to figure out if you've got money and to do the research on your own. Same with Pitney Bowes. You could, search the money in the unclaimed funds offices if you have an escheatment department. And some of the money is going to still be sitting at Pitney Bowes even after a few years. How much money is out there? So since March of 2008, we estimate 37% of all postage meters have been turned in. So think about this. In March 2008, there was 1.5 million postage meters in the United States. March 16th, which was the last date, and this is all from a Freedom of Information Act request that we had. On March 16th, it was 1,047,085 meters. They've stopped publishing these Freedom of Information requests with meter counts. We estimate, based on that change, that today there's about 950,000 meters left in existence. But that means that over 550,000 meters have been returned. Have clients gotten their money back for all those meters? We know that they haven't. In 15 states, we have found over 30,000 transactions turned over the states as unclaimed property with Pitney Bowes as the holder. That is an estimated value of $5 million. With all states, we'd estimate this to be about $15 million. And most of these transactions are probably from 2013 and prior. So because the vendors are allowed to hold these funds for longer periods of time. During the Freedom of Information Act request we did with the Postal Service, between years 2012 and 13, the Post Office documented $15.6 million of customers' unclaimed dormant account balances that the Post Office claimed as income. And you can see that quote in that periodical if you did a Google search on ft.ma.15.001. So we estimate the value of lost postage out there is about $108 million. $30 million from meter funds, $78 million from permit accounts, and there could be some for your organization. It could be worth searching because the largest organizations in the country have an inordinate share of this number. This gives you some of the numbers. So sometimes you find large transactions where you find $100,000 or a couple $100,000. Sometimes you find lots of small transactions. So we're searching this for our clients. These are some of our larger claims that we've been able to do for our clients, and you can see the numbers based on a specific industry, which is accounts that we have. Sometimes we find a lot, sometimes we find very little, but it's certainly something worth checking. So you can search for this money on your own. So we're going to talk to you about how you do it and explain the process so you can do this on your own. And certainly if you need help, we're here to help you with it. So the first way is you want to find the account numbers for current and past meters. So what were the postage accounts that you had where you were sending money? You enter these account numbers online on the vendor's website to see if you can get any data. Are they still active? Is there a balance in them? You contact your meter vendor to validate if in these accounts, whether they're active or not, what are the funds available? What are the balances? If there are funds that are available, you need to fill out meter forms from the vendors. Each of them have a refund request form that you can fill out. Some of them are online, some of them are paper-based. You want to then check the unclaimed funds websites to see if funds were turned in. This is only for Pitney Bowes. And the tips for working with the states is check the states where the meter was returned. So obviously, if you had a site in New York, you'd want to be able to make sure that you check the New York site. If you never had a site in Hawaii, there's no reason to check that. Try multiple naming conventions. The hardest part about finding money is if you're ABC Bank, well, maybe it's written as A space B space C space bank. Maybe it's written as A, B, C bank. Maybe it's written as ABC banking institution or ABC financial services. the way you type in those names on the websites makes a huge difference on what you're able to find. So try multiple different naming conventions to be able to see. There's also a website called Missing Money you can go to, missingmoney.com, and that's a holding place for about 2/3 of the states. So you can go to one website and do a lot of this work directly. You're going to need to make sure you have proof of the address and the business name, and in some cases, the vendor relationship. So make sure that you've got proof that you were at this office in Des Moines, Iowa, and that that you have a business name, the business name right, and that it's really helpful if you can prove that you had a business relationship, let's say with Pitney Bowes, and that you have an existing relationship, so you can ask them for help in proving that you did business. If you have old reports, that can suffice as well. And then keep detailed records for follow-up. How to search for your money. So for permits, build a listing of current and past permit numbers. So this can be done by, the best way to find this is to go to accounts payable and do an export of all the accounts payable transactions as far back as you can go, where USPS, Postmaster, United States Postal Service, and there's probably 5 or 10 names that would represent the post office that you'd want to do a search of. Look for transactions over, I would say, $100, $150, which would at least be the annual permit fees for the last bunch of years. And that will tell you. And then from there, go get copies of those invoices so you can see what permit were you spending, where was that permit deposited to. Work with your existing, if you have a USPS account manager, or if you can request one, if you're a big enough organization, ask them to do the search on the permit, that you found to tell you what the balances are. You can also go to the local postmaster in that area and you can find out what the balances are. And to enter any permit accounts onto the USPS Business Gateway, you can start an account on the USPS Business Gateway. You can link all those permit numbers, and from that you can see a lot more detail. Reach out to the local postmasters for closed permits to see what details they have and if they can validate the balances. And once you've validated those balances, fill out a form 3533, application for refund of fees, product withdrawal, and customer accounts. You need to request this form from the post office that you had the permit originally, because each form has a barcode on it, and that barcode is indicative of that particular local post office. What can be done to avoid this in the future? Obviously, you don't want to have lost postage in the future. You want to clean up some of the past, and you want to make sure you have a good process going forward. So what we recommend is get reports from your vendors that list account numbers. So especially from your meter vendors, what is the installation, lease account number, prepaid and advanced postage accounts? You should know these account numbers for all of your locations. The lease, you want to know the rate, term, end of lease, and the items covered. End of lease especially, so if you have older leases, are they expired? Does that help you itemize where things are? Know your meter rental and maintenance agreements, model and serial numbers and descriptions of every item. And these are the important things to know when you're requesting vendor reports. Enter any account numbers you find on the vendor's websites, and when you enter those accounts, you'll be able to see things like invoices and postage balances that will give you more information. And then monitor this inventory, your invoices and your online postage balances on a regular basis so you can keep track of it. Sometimes it's not even that meters have been returned, it's that, there's been an account that hasn't even used the meter in years, and $20,000 is sitting on an account in a prepaid balance. And that happens to us all the time. And so the more you can track your volumes online, you can see the status of those. Find all active locations with equipment. So if you have 30, 50 sites throughout your locations, it's good to be able to capture this information for all 30 to 50 locations. Wherever possible, centralize your accounts payable for equipment and postage. People that have centralized postage accounts, where there's one account that funds lots of sites, when a postage meter gets returned, the money goes back into the central account for everyone to use. So that keeps money from getting lost. When you have individual accounts, that's where it gets much more difficult. Enter your USPS permit accounts under the Business Gateway so you can keep track of your permits and your balances, and then set up a schedule for continual review. Sounds like a lot of work, but it's to effectively manage your mailing equipment portfolio and your accounts, this is the best way we found to do it. How can we help? If you need help with any of these things, if this is not in your daily needs of time frames, we do this for our clients every day. This is all we focus on, is helping our clients manage their mailing equipment and postage portfolios. We also offer to do a risk-free savings analysis where there's no charge or obligation, where we can quantify what types of savings are available for you. We work for you. We have no vendor affiliations. We don't get any money from vendors. We have helped our clients save millions in recovers fees in this. We're incredibly good at it. And we average 60% savings for our clients. It's totaled over $40 million since 2013. Pretty much everyone in our team has come from the mailing industry. We have over 200 years of experience, and we have the best-in-class tools to make this easy. Like, we have websites that provide you a level of inventory and management that no one offers. We provide insight and visibility, complete visibility through your spends on our dashboards. And the best part, that a reason our clients like, is we do not charge for our services. We only share in a small piece of any savings or recovery. So if we don't save you any money, we're free. And so there's absolutely no risk. And in exchange, we help you manage this category and give you the expertise and the support to do all the things that we discussed so far. Some other areas of savings you may want to consider: the mail equipment fleet management. We're averaging 60% for our clients. You can't search the internet to figure out what mailing equipment should cost. We manage 100,000 plus pieces of equipment. We know what it costs for the largest organizations in America and Canada. And so because of that, we're able to negotiate better agreements for our clients. And then and that's about a third of the savings. 2/3 of the savings is working directly with your locations to make sure that we have their needs taken care of. We provide them options, and then help them manage the renewal transactions or termination transactions. And that's where we drive the majority of the savings. We eliminate vendor fees. So we've found, hundreds of thousands of dollars of vendor fees we've had eliminated for our clients. So whether it's late fees, finance charges, insurance charges, transaction fees, meter limit overcharge fees, whatever it is, the vendors are charging more and more fees. We consolidate that detail, figure out ways to eliminate them, and then make sure they're taken care of for the future. Overcharges. None of the vendors are perfect billers, and we found over $10 million for our clients in vendor overcharges. You're being charged the wrong amounts, and we've been able to get that money back for our clients and get these bills fixed. And then we provide a web dashboard for everything that gives a single place to manage all your mailing spends across your enterprise. And we provide that dashboard for free for clients, because we're not here to charge you for a system. We're here to help you, to find savings and then share in a small piece of that savings. So the main way that we work with clients is we try to do a no-cost analysis, where we show you all the details of the savings. And this is a very detailed analysis that breaks down all the aspects of your portfolio. We can do this in usually less than 2 weeks from the time we get data from you. All we need is you to provide us data. We don't have to work with the sites. We can do this directly with your data and what we can plug into the vendor's website to collect the remaining information. We'll conduct the analysis, show you what savings are available. If you decide to move forward, we submit any vendor requests, lost postage forms, fees. We help to negotiate pricing. We help you create a catalog of equipment for the future. We work directly with your locations on asset validation, right sizing, terminations, and give you full implementation of all savings. And you approve everything up front. We don't do anything without your approval. We manage it in a web dashboard, and we provide ongoing support, because most organizations have sites that renew at all different times, and they need, or mailing questions that come up throughout. And so we're there to take care of our clients for the future. So one big thing that clients need, where they struggle with, is gaining visibility to their spends. This is incredibly important this year, because the government has some new lease requirements that says all leases have to be reported on the balance sheet, requiring companies to have detail of all of their agreements where they haven't had to in the past. We build that visibility for you, even if you don't have it today, and then manage it in our portal. So our job is to pull together all this data, create it, and manage it for you, so you can maximize the savings and make sure funds don't get lost. We work with the largest organizations in the United States and Canada, across every industry. Our core is that we usually work with organizations that have a lot of locations, because companies that have a single location can probably manage this more effectively. But someone who has 20, 50, 100, 1,000, 2,000 locations, they need someone to help them pull the whole thing together. And that's where we specialize. And like I said, we've gotten our clients over $40 million in savings. That's averaged, over 60% for our clients. We've never lost a client. Everybody that we've originally started with is working with us today, which we count as a testament, and they can leave at any time they want. And so in summary, there are huge amounts of money in lost postage available. and the levels are increasing. As more and more people return their meters, as the postage industry gets more fragmented, as there are fewer people that have expertise in this category, more money is going to get lost. Postage gets lost due to very fragmented processes that most organizations have. This money can be found and recovered if you're willing to put in the work. This can be avoided if we set up the right model for visibility and oversight. So if there's a way to pull all this data together and manage the data, we can eliminate these types of losses from happening. And if you need help from the experts, we're here and we can try to make this easy. And this is all we do. And our job is to make you look good, make our clients look good, and maximize any savings possible. But if not, you can certainly do what we talked about today on your own. And hopefully we gave you enough. We're gonna pass out a copy of this presentation to everyone who attended, and hopefully that will give you enough tools to be able to do this on your own if that's one of your goals. So I want to open it up to see if there are any questions. And Doris, maybe you can open up the line and see if there's anything that came up.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, if you have any questions, you can either put up your hand and I will unmute you, or you can type the question in the question box and we'll do our best to answer the question.
Not everybody likes to speak on these things too. So if there are questions afterwards, you'll have our email address and you can certainly email us after as well. But we'll leave the lines open for another minute. I'd like to thank everybody for joining the call today. Hopefully this information was helpful, and we will be sending out a copy of the presentation. And let us know if you have any questions in the future. Thank you very much.